Hi everybody, welcome to Dandelion Cottage and Watercolor Wednesday. I'm Leslie Watkins. These are blossoms from the Baptisia and they're a little bit bent, and I don't know if you can, the camera angle will show you that, but you see they're sort of growing at an angle. And what happened was we've had a lot of rain lately, and they put on a lot of top-heavy, lush growth, and then it got really warm and they flopped. And I didn't see this particular branch over on the other side of the bed, and it had been lying horizontally on the ground, and it kept growing, and so it just changed direction, and these beautiful blossoms started growing upright from their horizontal position. So the lawnmowers are coming, and I needed to get them up off the ground, so I went out there and I harvested them for today's lesson, and I think they're absolutely gorgeous. So I'm pretty sure that they're in the same pea family as are wisteria. I'll have to do my homework and check that out. But you can see how they open from the bottom of the stem and then continue to open as you travel up to the point. So it's sort of a spire-shaped flower. They come in all different colors. I've got some beautiful yellow ones that I particularly like for arrangements. They make great flowers for cut flowers. And you can see I've got a younger blossom here that's just starting to form some buds that will open. And then there were a whole bunch of these little ones that may or may not do anything. They're kind of young to be picked, but they are still very, very beautiful, and I think that they'd be awesome to paint. So that's our subject for today. And I'm going to go ahead and open up the watercolor sketchbook. And if you're interested in going back and seeing some of the previous watercolor videos that I've made, there's an entire playlist on my YouTube channel, and you can go there and you can watch many videos of all the different flowers that I have in the book. And I'm also, I don't know if you can hear Circe in the background, but she wants me to throw her mouse for her. She fetches, and I think she's going to settle down in a minute. It's almost her nap time. Circe's the little black cat that I have. I've been keeping a kind of a chronicle here of the blossoms as they come and go throughout the year at Dandelion Cottage. And last week I was working on peonies. So I've got a bunch of studies that I did just tucked in here. We also, you may have watched me begin this border here. So I have a decision to make. I could possibly add my beautiful lupine, Baptisia. So let's just see what that would look like. I'm just going to grab this one piece here. So I could continue the border, something like that, which might be interesting. Or go on to the next page, and I think I like that better. I think the other border will just get too busy if I continue on like that. I could have it going upright. This is the normal way that these flowers would be growing. So that would be really pretty. I think that's what I'm going to do. So let's get the page prepared, and I'll get everything all set up here. I'm just going to clip this open. And I'm going to protect this side. Just add a little piece of my copy paper, like so, and add a little more tape to hold that in place. All right, and then off to my side, as always, I've got just 3 colors. I've got yellow, red, and blue. I've got a number 2 pencil, and I've got a couple of brushes, a bigger one and a smaller one. And I'm going to move some of these things over a little bit so that they don't cast any shade on my paper. I'm working in a Northlight studio, so the light is coming from this angle. You can see the shadow cast on my page when I hold my hand here. So I want to make sure that I avoid that. So when I'm working, when I'm holding my brush, because I'm right-handed, the shadow is going to fall to the right side of my hand. Now if you're a lefty, then you want to have the light coming from the opposite side so that you don't cast a shadow over the area where you're about to paint. Okay. So let me get this arranged so that you can get a good view. It's not going to work very well. I'm going to have to take it out of the container here. This is the kind of plant where when you take it out of the water, it begins to wilt almost immediately, and as soon as you put it back into water again, it perks up. So I'm going to have to work fast, and I'm simply going to begin by making a kind of a direction line here for the central stem, and I'm giving that a little bit of a curl. Now up on the end here is going to be the green tip. And then all these beautiful little blossoms. They're like little pouches. They're very sweet. They've got 2 lobes. And they're kind of puffy. And the stem is the most beautiful color. So this particular specimen is sort of a kind of a lavender or a violety pink color. And what happens is the tiny blossoms have this wonderful little stem that attaches to the main stem, and that has a lot of crimson in it, which looks very pretty with the peony that I have already on the page here. And the stem itself that they spring from has a lot of that same kind of a pinkish crimson color in it. It's very delicate. It's very delicate, very beautiful. But one of the very interesting things here is the way these whorls are formed on the stem. So what I mean is that each of these little sections of blossoms are a whorl, and they are arranged all around the sides of the stem. So I'm just looking to see if I can count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, it looks like there might be 6 or 7 whorls to each section. So a lot going on, a lot to pay attention to. As always, this is meant to be an impression, not a scientific study, so I'm not doing a botanical rendering here. I just want to capture a beautiful design that's going to complement what I already have on the page, and sort of capture the essence. I'm also very interested in capturing the color and all the tones here because they're so beautiful. So as I look at this, I'm doing a kind of a careful drawing just to get started, just because I want to make sure that I have all of the important features that I want to capture. And when I start painting, I'll continue refining that drawing. So it doesn't have to be perfect right from the beginning. And, you know, sometimes I do a very careful drawing. That is not the sort of work I would typically do when I'm making a short video like this, because back in the day when I used to do botanical illustration professionally and would get assignments to do different subjects, I could spend 1 or 2 days, maybe even longer, just doing the drawing alone, and they were long days. And then once the drawing was complete, it would be sent into to whatever company it was that was commissioning the artwork for approval. And so they would take the drawing and it would go on the rounds throughout the company. And once everybody signed off on it, I would then continue with the painting. So this is not that kind of a detailed rendering. Okay, this is what I would call more artistic, more spontaneous, and a lot more fun. Also, if you're pressed for time and you don't have a lot of time to be able to spend a week on one picture, this is a great way to be able to still have fun painting and drawing and creating something beautiful. And if you do have more time, then go for it. You know, the sky's the limit. All right, and then I think, so what I'm just noting the anatomy, basically. I'm just showing where these whorls of flowers are stemming from, because I do want that to be accurate, because that's part of the characteristic of this particular specimen. So that's important. You know, color can be a little more personal. You can emphasize certain tones to work with your composition. You have a little more freedom there, but I do want to make sure that the structure looks as it does in nature, or at least gives the impression of doing that. I may not be copying it exactly. In fact, I'm not. All right, so this is coming along pretty well. I think I've got most of the dominant features here. I've got some blossoms in the background. I'll fill that out as I go along. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very pale, kind of a yellow-green, and just going to put a wash of that color on the buds here. I'm leaving a little bit of the white for the highlight. And I'm going to continue down here and there, not everywhere, along the stem. Get that established. Now, many of these areas I'll go back over with that beautiful lavender pink color, but the base is going to be this beautiful pale green. So there's my stem, there's my structure, and now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix up a pale pink. So I'm just using the straight color here on my palette with just a little bit. Okay, so just the red, and bring that over towards my blue and let just a drop of that blue get in there to give it that beautiful kind of a cool tone. And you always want to use a white palette because that way you can see what your mixture is through the transparent watercolor. So that's sort of the family I want to be in. But some of these blossoms also have a warmer hue, and I want to vary it. So I'm going to go on this side as well and pick up some of the yellow that's on the palette, and you see that's going to give me that beautiful peachy tone. So now I think you can see the difference between the warm over here with more yellow and the cool over here with more blue. And I'm just going to use those puddles of paint to get this established, and I'm going to paint very lightly. So the warmer hue is going to be on the light side of the specimen, and as I'm looking at these petals, I'm noticing that they're very pale, almost white at their base. At the bottom of their pouch. They look like little pouches to me. So I'm working very delicately. There's hardly any paint on the brush, and I will zoom you in just a minute so that you can get a better view. Let me just get these started. And I can always come back and make adjustments as needed. Now over on this side, I can see more of that kind of a cooler pink. Now, a lot of these subtle color changes may not be immediately noticeable, but in the end, they make a big difference. So what I find as I paint is that it's a series of decisions. It's careful observation and then kind of analyzing what you see, translating three-dimensional form onto a two-dimensional plane, and then making a decision as to what do you want to focus on, what's important, how do you want to adjust your colors and your tones. And when you're working on a decorative piece, as this is, I'm also making a decision as to placement. So I'm not necessarily following what the specimen looks like in life. I'm translating it to this nice shape that I think will enhance the composition of the page. So let's see if we can get you a better look at this. a little bit better. I'm going to go back to my green spire up on the top, and this time I'm taking a slightly darker mixture of the green, and I can start to pick out some of these buds. Okay, and this is what I mean by continuing to draw with my brush. And the buds that are just forming are getting just a little bit of the pink tonality in them, but they still have a lot of green. So I'm adding a little more green to some of these flowers on the top, and a little more pink. I can indicate some of the buds that are growing away into the background. Okay, and then I'm just going to continue like this with a slightly darker tone, looking for those areas where there's shadow. And by the way, I didn't actually use my larger brush. I'm using a small brush for this. There's a lot of detail going on here, so I didn't need to use that big brush to get started. But this will basically be a one brush painting. So, you know, you don't need a lot of supplies to get started. One good brush, 3 good colors. I always use professional quality paint because there's a huge difference in the quality of the paint that you use. So you want to make sure that you're off to a good start with good quality paints. Good paper. This is 100% cotton rag paper, specifically designed for watercolor. And what else? I used a pencil. I've got a couple of containers for water. I've got a sponge. So off to the side here, I have a damp sponge that I can use to remove excess moisture from my brush with. And you're pretty much ready to begin. So if you're interested in following along and doing some of these pictures with me, please go to my website at dandelioncottagedesign.com, and there's information there about my upcoming classes and workshops. You'll also be able to find some links to be able to get the watercolor starter kit, which is a no frills box that has all the things I just mentioned that's delivered to you, and a lot more information. So please visit Dandelion Cottage Design when you get a minute. You can also go to Watercolor Paintbox. If you go directly to watercolorpaintbox.com, you can see the contents of the starter kit. Now, I want to be able to ascertain the full scale of values, in other words, lights and darks that I'm using. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix a nice dark mixture. This time I'm using a stronger red and some of the green, darker green that's on my palette. So if I just put a couple of touches of this where these stems are, where it gets quite dark, that's going to help me to see where my lights, my mediums, and my darks are. And I'll be able to see what adjustments I may need to make. This is such a great candidate for a border design. I really love the way the shape of this is kind of lending itself beautifully to the overall design. All right, so now that I've got an indication of the overall design, I've got some lights, some mediums and darks, I've got some of my colors established, I'd like to introduce some of the leaves because they make such a beautiful shape, and I think that would be a really nice addition. So let's pick a leaf. I also want to get some of those beautiful buds. So let's see what we've got here. So here's a nice one. And let's see what else. I have these little buds in a separate container, and they make a beautiful bouquet just all on their own. Just a beautiful green bouquet. Here's an example of one of the big leaves that's too big for this design. And let's see, that's kind of fun. So here's a young leaf that's or a young bud that's beginning to have a pair of leaves unfurl on either side of it. You know, all these stages of development give you more information to convey, which makes your picture more interesting, hopefully. And I've got these little tiny buds. So that's what that looks like. They're so pretty. All right, well, I think these two are kind of nice. So I'll pick one of these two. I think I like this one because it has some of those leaves starting to unfurl there. And I think what I'll do is I'll have it coming across the top here, a little canopy. So I'm going to get my pencil again. And I'll put this down where I can see it. I don't know if you're going to see very much of that. I can move this down a little bit. There we go, something like that. So I'm just going to have this come along this way. There's my bud. And then the stem kind of forks off into these baby leaves. continue over on the other side, and then here I have the stem from the leaf next door. Now let's count. All right, so if we look at this leaf, we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sections. Okay, so if we divide it in half, got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you see that? So I may not draw every single section, but I want to be able to indicate that there's a good sized cluster of all these different sections. And I'm going to let that go behind here. Makes for a better design. Okay. All right. Again, the pale yellow to begin. Yellow-green, I'm sorry, yellow-green. And I'll just get these leaves started. Now this part of the design is incidental to the rest, so I'm not going to spend as much time on it, and I'm not going to make it as prominent as some of the other things. So for instance, if we look at the entire page, it's the peony at the bottom is the star performer. Everybody else here is a supporting actor. So they don't have to be as fancy or as finished. So even more loose, more sketchy. Just enough so that it reads. I want to get the kind of texture that those little buds make. It almost looks like the end of an ear of corn. All right, so there is my first wash. Now I'm going back into my yellow with a little bit of blue, and I'm making a slightly darker mixture. And I can begin to pick out some of the darker areas. The shadow side of the stem. And what you choose to emphasize is entirely up to you. Okay, that's what's going to make the painting yours. Nobody else is going to do it exactly the same way. So you make those, as I mentioned before, you make those decisions as you work, and the painting begins to evolve into a unique statement that's all your own. Your calligraphy, your color choice, your subject matter, all the different things, all the different elements that come together to create a beautiful painting. Right, so I'm just doing some very loose, sketchy drawing, and finally I want to go back into that beautiful bud and do a little more texture of some of these beautiful, beautiful little shapes. So I can just capture the shadow side, and that's going to start to look like something. All right, so let's take a look. Let me zoom you out and see how this is looking all together here. All right, I like that. Now, one of the things that I'm noticing is that it's looking a little bit pale and washed out here where this transition is between the Baptisia and the peony. So what I'd like to do is, I'm happy with this. I like this sort of fading off and going back into the background. But I want to continue working in this area here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to develop this area a little more carefully, and then you'll be able to see that in the thumbnail when I post the video. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. So thank you so much for joining me today. Please remember to subscribe to Notes from Dandelion Cottage. You can do that at dandelioncottagedesign.com. You can also do it if you're watching on YouTube. There'll be a link in the description below, and if you're watching on Facebook, there is a sign up button at the top of the page that will bring you to Notes from Dandelion Cottage. Sign up and you will be able to be notified of all the things I have coming right up. I'm just in the middle of working on the latest issue. I'm going to be sending it out within a day or two, so you want to get on there for the upcoming summer activities. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay well, stay happy, stay inspired, and I will see you next time.